Gabriel, c'est à vous.
Yes, okay. I'm Gabriel Safdie, and I'm happy to welcome you as president of Sans Desire de Stanstead to the second event of our ongoing Zoom bi-weekly poetry series. The idea of for this online series occurred to me while our programming of events had been suspended on account of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I must say, the enthusiastic response we have had is beyond our expectations. It is very exciting to have so many expressing their interest to tune in to a poetry event, as well as already to have numerous poets eager to participate. It appears that the great and pure art of poetry is still very much alive, perhaps even experiencing resurgence. C'est une série bilingue, alors qu'on on a entendu des poètes anglophones et francophones, comme on l'a déjà entendu au lancement avec les deux poètes célèbres Diane Regimbault et Chantal Ringuet. I would like you to meet Sonia Patenaude, who's our coordinator and moderator, and who will introduce this reading's poets, Steve Luxton and Victoria LeBlanc. Thank you. Go ahead, Sonia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much and welcome. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful day. I hope you are nice and comfortable. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our poets of the day, Victoria LeBlanc and Steve Luxton. Victoria LeBlanc holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in writing from Concordia University. She studied art at the Banff Centre School of Fine Arts and at the School of Art in London, England. She completed her studies in visual culture at McGill and has participated in many individual and collective exhibitions in Canada and in the United States. She is the current curator of the Municipal Art Gallery in Westmount and the former director of the Visual Arts Center and Art Gallery McClure. She published her first poetry book, Hold, in 2019, with a forthcoming collection, Mudlark, to be published shortly. Steve Luxton is a Canadian poet living near Ayerscliffe in Quebec, Eastern Townships, and he is one of the founders of the Moosehead Review. He has been active with publishing houses such as Canadian Forum, Canadian Literature, Fiddlehead, Side Street, and Jacket in Australia. Mr. Luxton has published numerous poetry collections, Late Romantics with Robert Allen and Mark Tesher, The Hills That Pass By, Iridium, Luna Moth, and other poems, as well as the In Vision of the Birds, his most recent book. Let me take it back. His most recent book, The Dying Meteorologist, having been published in 2019 by DC Books. An occasional harmonica player, he has also taught English literature at John Abbott College and creative writing at Concordia University. So, our first reader today will be poet Victoria LeBlanc.
Hi, everybody. And thank you, Sonia, and thank you, Gabriel, for this opportunity. So the first session, I'm going to read from my first ever collection of poetry called Hold. It's a series of poems about loss of a mother, and how we come to terms with loss and grief. And also it's about the healing role of art in that process. So the collection has a narrative arc. It begins with my mother at a very young age facing the death of her own mother, and then it ends with her own passing. So the you, when I'm reading, is always my mother, as if I'm talking to her, except at the end when she's talking to me. First one is called Mud Road. You'd watch your feet moving, you told me, along the mud road. You'd watch the soggy muck trickle over the side of your shoe onto your sock, then your skin. You'd sit all day with it caked on your leg in the one-room schoolhouse. You'd look down at the drying gray shape splattered there. You could have washed it off, you said, but liked the way it tightened on your calf, the way the mire wore you. Second poem is Cleaved. As if you'd hidden inside a lair, curled up, waiting with her for death. You'd been prepared, you thought, from the age of 6. It could happen any time, they told you. You lived imagining your mother's death, as if life can imagine death. That final night when the doctor came and said, yes, this is the night. You waited to take your turn to enter the room alone with her. You entered the room as you entered the lair, as in scent, feel of her, as in shelter, nest, nested, as in held. It was only when her body left, carried out by men from the funeral home. Walls cleaved. 13, you wore dark colors for a year. Your brother, father, black armbands. My mother lived till 96 with great autonomy in her own apartment, and then she fell. So this is this section of the book. Riven, limp limb, falling, free fall, fallen. They limbed the felled trees, dying nerves in the vestibular system, crystals in the labyrinth, hairline crack, gives in. Rift in the limb, riven, body writhing, body riven from its home, torn, split, asunder. This is when my mother's in long-term care, slightly towards the end. My mother had a great sense of humor, sense of the absurd, and I think she would have liked this poem. There's a bit of humor in it. Escape hatch. Terminal delirium. Expect confused ending. What day is it? Wednesday. In November? No, August. August, not November. No, August. What time? 10. 10? You aren't in Venice? No, I'm here. For how long? For as long as you need me. Is Susan in Venice? No one is in Venice. Susan is on her way. It is a long day in August. We search for November. A month, a day, other than we are unable to get the hour, the channel, the program, because the red button on the humidifier isn't working. And she cannot hear the program, and her watch will not get channel 3, and we've lost our father's sister. What was her name? Is she sitting there? We laugh. Escape hatch. We had not fathomed theft at the last hour. The next one is called Ma, M-A-W. The coriander has gone to seed. Not enough water, though who knows, could be flowering according to its time. I am not far enough ahead to know. For instance, a mother could speak wisdom between mouthfuls of time, between gulps, between breaths, could utter in the thick of things, to the pale skin of things. Time is all you have, and all you do not have. A lean maw keening against our bodies, and it seeds us, and the rebel hearts of us devours whole. Mother. And after her passing was a time of reconciliation and finding solace in memories. So this is from the last chapter called Well, which takes its name from this poem. Ashes, dust, fine bone fragments in a clay vessel on the mantel in the living room. Carpal, sternum, tibia, sacrum, shaft of femur, minor salts and minerals. Elemental fingerprint of a mother living in a particular place, breathing a particular air, or the soul may live in the bone. I come and go in and out of the house. I come and go in and out of the room. Some nights I stand still, holding the vessel. A well is there. I fall in. I am water pulled from the well. The last poem I'll read is called Notes on the Back of Envelopes. My mother was always scribbling notes on the back of envelopes. Pick up strawberry jam, call Marge, don't forget bridge, bring cards. And she did this up to the very end, literally days before she passed. But the notes became much more fragmented and philosophical and wistful. So I've written this poem. It has 10 fragments, as if my mother is remembering her lamentations for joys and telling me what she might want me to know if she could speak poetically. So this is in my mother's voice. Notes on the back of envelopes. Mea culpa, there is a shelf. There's a portrait by Rembrandt, look at it. If your hand aches, paint me in vermilion. Soft ochre across my brow. I remember the clusters of chamomile by the gate. The sound of the gate at night in the wind. It gets dark early in November. There were tongues in the leaves, thin voices, sensoria, what did I miss? Skin, bone, blood, against skin, bone, blood. Be capacious, daughter. Go down to the river again, there's the driftwood limb. A dream in the marrow, a fawn by the water's edge. At dusk, the heron cry echoes on the river, the sound of my name in its throat. We swam all night under lavender skies, empty-handed as one must be, single-eyed as one must be. I found a blue thread. The heart is not a solitary chamber. He knew Italian, your father. He slept under the almond trees during the war. I knit him a sweater to walk along the beach. He gathered stones. He washed them. Sometimes he sang. With what voices do you lament? Do not lament. We were the ones who knit lace in the garden. I remember those larger spaces, the tenor singing Journée de Naissance. I want to hold a small animal, chant encomia in the morning. Did you see them in the hallway? They understand the speech of the voiceless. I was a nest set in the fork of two branches. I was a lamp lighted in the window. I took refuge in the mountains. I touched something smooth and heard music. The whispers have ceased in the hallway. A half moon shines on withered limbs. I gather memento mori in my hands. I carry them to the river. I kneel on the muddy earth. I sing to my fluted bones gently, gently. The night nurse bathes me. I rolled up the tarpaulin. I lay in a red field. The sirens sang a dirge. I coiled. I bit. Once I covered my face with pomegranate juice. Once I wore a tragic mask. Come close. Listen, my daughter. I am not a bird afraid of an empty bush. The muses live on the mountain. I see the pole star. I see the smoke hole. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Steve, we are ready to hear your words.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
I'm on. Thanks, Victoria. Thanks. I'm going to try and sit slightly on the bias like you did. I kind of liked you sitting on the bias like that. Well, I live in the Eastern Townships. I'm not born in the Eastern Townships, but I've been in and out of the Eastern Townships and lately mostly in for 40 years. And I've met a series of characters and written poems about them. I'm probably a character myself, so they're probably writing something about me. This one's called Pastoral, and it's about the guy who used to live next door to me. And I used to ask him, what was a good, when I first moved to the Eastern Townships, where's a good place to go for a walk? Pastoral. Seeking advice on a good walk, I drop in next door where old Ted in the back room slumps before his TV. Stay off that new green hike and bike only trail, he says. Local punks don't like it. They'll run their ATVs right over the top of you. What about the fields? No, keep clear of them, especially when in corn. It hides bikers, popped, doped up, crazy guards will shoot you like a rat. The country roads? Ha, he growls. Early this morning on ours, I saw a moose track higgledy-piggledy and full of blood. And the season ain't even open yet. Them poor animals, thinking they're still safe, are hurrying for town-posted land, right past them Jones's boys. Jones's boys? Outlaws, live in that beat-up place up the road, run a ring that sells wild meat, hunt year-round, likely shot my wife Hazel's missing puppy. Then I'd best rent a video in the village and stay home. Good idea, grumbles Ted, swiveling back to his own. But in case there's stray shots, stay clear of the window. Okay, so maybe in the same vein, actually that poem is not so old, and but this one is much older. And when I first came to the townships, which I'd never heard of before, I thought it was a pretty remote spot. And I sort of felt in some ways that I was an eccentric, you know, against my will here. As it turned out, I wasn't. It was full of eccentrics, but I didn't know that at the time. And I had another name, named Artie Walker, who had a capacity for tall tales, which people, well, he didn't think they were tall tales, that people sniffed at these, right? And one of them was about how cold it would get and how hard it was to farm there. Cold spell. The pump on Artie Walker's land has split, he claims, though locals purse their mouth at it. For what I'm worth, the new guy, it's so cold that Sundays stuck to shed roofs where they'd lit, I counted maybe 70 freeze-dried tits. Old Artie's just a shirker. It ain't the cold, men say. If every lame excuse he's told of busting frost and parching drought were true, he wouldn't have to pull up stakes and fold. He'd be mining tall tales out there like gold. Maybe. Aged syrup's drunk here. Mine's brand new. Artie is strange. His bit of hill and slough's no sparser than my own. In lonesome fact, they are my own. We share and bear a view of seeps and sags and ridges heaped up blue. But the folks here like think simple. Alack, if more than car or beer eases your back. Claims my eccentric friend, they're so damn tight they stuff their imaginations in a sack and snuff them with a cat's new brew out back. Now that's daily lingo from one too bright to drown his mythic oddness, who thought he might warm through fancy this cold section alone. Hell, he intones, the winter here's no fight compared to the bushels dumped on your light. Fancy alone, huh? Shaking my head home, drunk, but not enough. I start a flat-out croon, mimicking the wind in the stuck blue trees, trying through forlorn heightening to loan this severe spot an art enough for me. As it turned out, I was sort of exaggerating how remote it was, but it was remote. And along the country, continuing along the country line, and actually this is really, it's called redneck genesis, but really it's not about Canada because the term is irrelevant here. And you don't really get sort of extensive trailer parks here as you do in northern Vermont, by the way. And this poem was written after driving through a section of northern Vermont. Redneck genesis. From the bush back of roller coaster roads, pastures spill gleaming and anonymous like snaps from fumbled garage sale albums. In a box-shaped clearing slumps a derelict trailer, sag-backed by a kitchen tip from which protrudes broken TVs, dirt bike bits, a gold toy World Wrestling Federation Championship belt in a final bout with rank gone to wild tulips. Okay. It's fall, and though it's a lovely summer's day today, but fall is coming. And here's a short one about fall, as short as the previous one. And it's called Illustration. Illustration. Stab wounds of autumn sumac, blue teardrop cry of the robin, noting the season from the molting teddy bear gold of the tamarack, crested milkweed floss. So autumn halts briefly above the caption, that which must fall is most lovely. And I obviously am over 60, and I wrote a poem when I was 60, and it's called Crouching Tiger. And a crouching tiger, by the way, is in Chinese mythology not a tiger, but it's an individual who's gone to the woods, right? And he's living there, either pursuing a spiritual path, or he's been driven into the woods by society. But he's a very worthy person. And and this poem alludes to that particular thing. Crouching Tiger, written upon turning 60. Late afternoon, roaming the bushland. What radiant, almost visionary foliage. Fall beauty I've read somewhere only matched in China. Leaves golden like the robes of the emperor, and crimson as the paper enfolding arms. Good citizens, as a matter of course, would furnish a beggar, since custom said he may one day be ruler. For legends told of worthies wrongly banished from the court, to years of wandering the land of lakes and rivers, dwelling in the wilds as crouching tigers, till vindicated they returned in glory to mount the dragon throne. What is it I seek in this glimmering, thinning realm? Great renown, riches, restorative waters, a remote clearing where some lunatic or forest Buddha beckons from his chime-hung glue-board temple? Will the next trail bend tell? In a logger slash edging a beaver pond, blue jays flash, twisting, maybe scoffing. High up a lone yellow birch, spared to receive the cut, an old heron's nest sways. A new relationship. I wield a shovel by my country house stoop, preparing a long neglected flower bed, chopping at the nutty roots of unpruned perennials, unburying cast-off beer caps, bent nails, screws. She readies the new plants, buttery yellow daylilies, crimson columbine, pansies, lily of the valley, brought down that morning from her plot in the city. She remarks, it's important whether a couple can garden together. And I shrug, chuckle, and assert, most men are hunters primarily. It's probably different hard wiring, and play toss the shovel at the brush pile, javelin-like. Still, I help her transplant and feel sure that in her eyes I have come up to snuff and shown my stuff. Then, in a final savvy touch, I haul up rocks from the river to neatly edge the bed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for suggesting that, Judith. Okay. Victoria?
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Steve. And I guess there are lots of eccentrics living in Eastern Townships, much more eccentric than you. So I'm so sorry that happened to your reading. This second session, I'm going to read from a book that, a collection I'm working on called Mudlark. Mudlark is not a bird. Maybe it is, but it's also means a person who scavenges through river mud for objects of value. And in this collection, I'm like the river mark roaming, the mudlark roaming along a mud path by the river and through reed beds along the river, the St. Lawrence, and a particular place that used to belong to my father's family. So there is a search for personal history in this place, but I move out from that to a more collective history of place. And more recently, to a lot of the homeless that are finding shelter in this quite abandoned place. So the book is about place, and also how through the creative process for myself, both painting and writing, we come to understand place more deeply, or we can. First one is called Lapse. They hand you the end of a ragged thread, then disappear. Salt marsh to estuary, to estuary, upriver to here. Bones under the ground shift. Sound of water lapping without them. Lapsus memoria to remember what you never knew. Graphene to write. Inscribe, incise unmemory. Hearsay, no place. Place. It has a sound, it has a touch you step into. Long arms arcing. Go down to the studio as you would to the river. Find bracken, broken dikes, bind twigs with pliant rushes. Something beckons in the river. Face, head, arms break the surface, disappear. It isn't that I follow, it is that I dream. Lay yellow-green sheen onto water with paint and desire. All my urgent metaphors waiting, long arms arcing. This next poem is about where we live, the island of Montreal, which is part of the Archipelago Hochelaga. It's called Confluence. Archipelago Hochelaga, place of confluence, of history, of rivers coiling through a continent, through rapids, marshes, estuaries, slow flow to the sea. This edge of an island, this ledge I walk, the river is home here, is fate, is time, drifting down mountains, silt strata, vessels, clay shards in the riverbeds. Along the shore, I follow rhizomes, I spread my limbs through moist earth. I forage for lineage. Here villages gather, scatter, people of the standing stones, people of the eastern gate of the longhouse, shelters, bones and ashes, seeds in the sediment, sage embers of language, of roots of words, of basswood, staghorn sumac, red swamp maple, tangled limbs in the pondweed, upriver, downriver, in shallows, reed beds they dream. I tie a boat to a splintered quay, rusted dike, its arms and hooks, their hands and hearts, I know them. They echo in the blood, in the marrow, echo great blue heron, black-crowned night waiting. Fish are leaving, dry grass smolders, soil is eroding, this path under moonglow is landfill. Swallows, their nests unravel, their longing liquid song in the morning. By the river, I walk. The next three poems have to do with personal history. So one is about my grandfather, the other two about my father. Tessitura. The sound, the cadence of your name, old Acadia, Amide, Hamidas. Sundays at the church of Les Douleurs, dark priestly gowns, dark hymns, you hold them. Chant liturgies, Ave Maria, Gracia plena. Your mother praying, Holy Father, let this be a sign. But your voice on the river, They hear it from the house, something loose, something other, fine threads fraying. Sounds moving up from your chest into your throat against your tongue. Tessitura, was it silt from the river? And the song, what was it? An aria? A chant? Or that rumor about opera, but if so, which one? And for whom did you sing? Beyond the night and the echo in your bones that never reached me. This is called What the Mind Cannot. I sculpt your head, Father, blue-gray mud from the riverbed. Beside the willow where the mud is loose, up to my elbow, I reach down, hands trying to remember, to hold, as in to cup, the moist clay mound to mold temporal bone, nape of neck, arch of brow, eye, cheek, bone, how the skin stretched over the bone, taut. Light moves through water like a snake. What the mind cannot, the hand knows. This is called Stones of My Father. They lie on Chinese silk in a box. Sapphire, topaz, smoky quartz, amethyst, mostly diamond cuts, 57 facets to a stone, 1/4 inch in diameter. He'd lose them sometimes on the 56th cut, emerge from his workshop deflated. Down in the mouth, my mother called it. It's just a stone, she'd say. My father bent to gather them, muddy brown or gray, from a roadside ditch. Roamed the edge of the sea at low tide. Sold scrap metal at the yard Saturday mornings for semi-precious. So many left in the end, unfinished stones. Grinders, grit, diagrams, oval cut, moonbeam, pasha. Philosopher's stones, those gems, he'd say, shaking his head. Humbled, awed by stones, by stars, magnolia trees, the particular white of birch bark and time. Beside his bed, an amethyst geode he took to the veterans' ward when he left, though he could not name it. These last two poems have to do more with going down and lying down in the reed bed or spending time down there in different seasons. And a homeless woman that I kept on bumping into and wished to know but didn't. While lying that night in the reeds, light wind, I lie in the reed bed. I close my eyes, I listen. Scuttling sounds, I am not alone, there are others. Early spring till the snow falls, they come and go, sleeping here by the river amongst the reeds. And that woman, she could be close or lying further east, always here early morning when I walk, this year more than last. It is the same woman. She gets up from her blanket when she sees me coming, stuffs it in her bag. We eyed each other once. She didn't smile back. Why would she? Sheltered here amongst the homeless, the patrol. She's wary, her face wary, narrow ankles, delicate hands. I heard her speak, though not to me, and know her voice now. But will I leave before the dark settles or stay throughout the long night lying here, this flattened bed of dried reeds, and feel the contour of the night in this place between and falling there? Or is she lying further west where the beds are thicker, other tent-like structures, no human voices? And what would I say? Only wind in the reeds, ragged intonations, almost a drumming, a rattling of reeds, other rustlings and dampness seeping up into the bed, where river meets land, smell of dank, uncertain, between. And the last poem is called Afternoon in Winter. raw umber, no other color. You lay it on the white paper with a fine brush, and it streams down slowly, slowly staining the white. The white is of snow that day by the river. The umber is of reeds locked in ice. No stirring, no wind even. You must capture this, how you felt standing by the river in the winter, how you crouched among the stalks unseen, how the reeds towered, how their frayed, dried heads bowed and bent in the cold, and how the sky was gray, and how, in the white snow under the reeds, you lay your body down, as on a bed, as in a shelter, and cried for beauty and death. Thank you. Steve, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Victoria. All right, Steve, we're ready for you.
Oh, yeah, okay. Harmonicas. Well, probably most of us encountered harmonicas first when we saw, and this is sort of provides a continuity with one of Victoria's latter poems, homeless people or people playing harmonicas at intersections. And usually they're not very good, and though sometimes there's an exception. And one time about 20 years ago, I was in Vancouver on a rainy night, and there was a guy playing a blues harp on the corner that just blew me away. And I have not forgotten it, and I do remember it. Harmonica Bum. Under a flickering street lamp by a manhole, he swallows winter wind, gasps and puffs a plaintive solo. He's a hand-to-mouth nomad, scantily wrapped in sewer steam and his low-down tear-away sound. There, but for God's grace, go I, maybe almost dead. If I'd my heart with me, I'd join in, two lamp-flung shadows sharing and shaking out a mean tune. So instead, I dig in some coins. From his stack of frayed collars, he grins, takes his gob iron, that's a harmonica, takes his gob iron, blows a lick that grabs my ear, swirls me alongside him down the dizzy wind tunnel of a bottomless blues bend. Okay, so it seems to me that if I'm going to do a blues or going to do some blues poetry, I should at least do something which is intrinsically and iconically Canadian. And what is more iconically Canadian than a loon? And this is called North Country Lament. Blue Loon, you'll notice, by the way, this echoes Blue Moon too. So it's both the blues and sort of, echoes one of the songs from the classic American songbook. Blue Loon, I see you swimming alone in the freezing marsh, statuesque as a shelf carving with that famous catch in your voice. So what's up or down? The warm waters of Cape Hatteras will soon be entirely booked. Hurry south right away, or your life won't be worth an old song. That's where they migrate to, by the way, in the winter. Get my drift? Time for fall departure. Wings flung wide, head up and neck stretched despite its big white ring. And give me stranded here a final sympathetic song. Good. Also, before you vamoose, let me pull my harmonica and blow you a goodbye tune. It's a blues, of course, from your own repertoire, about a glum guy left behind again at evening, wading this autumn swamp's rim, his leaky boots full of cold tears. Now, there's an allusion there I should have told you before. The swampy Cree Indians believe that the lakes that the loons live on in the summer and sing on are in fact impoundments of their collected tears, you see. So, which is a wonderful myth, a wonderful myth. I've always wondered whether I wanted to be a writer or a musician. And I think actually I wanted to be a writer. But every now and then, because writing is a somewhat sort of, what would you call it? Sort of a chair creed, if you want to call it that. I yearn to be a blues musician instead. And this is a poem about that. It's called Anti-Writer Screed. Instead, I could have been a blues contender. A harmonica howler tapping salt from my tin-plated shaker on the big slug's tail. A cool down child blowing of funky bughouses, clip joints, and train hoppers' liberty. Joy and despond beyond compare. Oh, Sonny Boy, Little Walter, Snooky Pryor, Junior Wells and Paul Butterfield, great honking pantheon of blue. Oh, poor subway strap hanger, me. A scribbler in day job beige, a down-in-the-mouth wannabe. But in dreams, zoot-suited, full-pleated, pretty gal-treated, blues-rooted, executing the deep bends true. Oh, lift off the roof. Now, I was actually very lucky. I grew up certainly in my teenage years in Toronto, and there was a bar in downtown Toronto on Spadina Street called Grossman. Some of you might know about that. And that really was the place where at that time in the 70s and 80s, all of the best Canadian blues players gathered. And I lived just right across the road in Kensington Market. And I would go over there and listen to them. This poem is called Got My Mojo Working But. Now, Got My Mojo Working, most of you know of Muddy Waters, probably one of the greatest of all the blues men. And Got My Mojo Working is perhaps his greatest and most famous song. His mojo, of course, it's a reference actually to West African mythology. It's his magic charm. I got my mojo working, right? And I allude to that in this particular poem. I can even play, I think, the first opening chords. Etc., etc., etc. Anyway, but it was there I saw somebody I wanted to be. It was a wonderful harmonica player, and that's what this is about. Got my mojo working, but from the classic blues by Muddy Waters. Back then, the famous lament wailed at me in a beer-splashed Spadina Avenue tavern. I was a fresh migrant, not wandered north from steamy Mississippi cotton flats, but born south from Toronto's distant suburbs by Boston downtown. Up on stage, the musicians included a harmonica player belting out accompaniment to Muddy's great song. Like myself, he was just a kid, though with a big head start at acting cool, for he could play. Suck and blow that thing like a 12-bar Rambo. Whoa, I sure wanted to be like him, so funky and world-weary. Maybe even a match for the dude who stole legendary bluesman Robert Johnson's Willie Mae. With his harp, I figured he could have it all. The guys buy him drinks and the girls swoon. Nothing but good times. But then again, maybe not. A great act, they say, will often just get you a great act. For how does Muddy's song go? I got my mojo working, but it just won't work on you. Nothing doing. There's no charm or song that sweeps life's snags and losses away, I learned. The years brings on the blues. Still, more often than not, I pull out my harp and play. And sure, the world doesn't come hurrying. Winning neither caress nor coin, I get some comfort. A little solo when life, that fat-headed cocksure lead guitar, gets it all wrong. And finally, in the blues vein, if I can find my harmonica, probably I had a number of favorite blues players, harmonica players, Junior Wells, and certainly Paul Butterfield, who was probably the first great white harmonica player. His song was The Thriller's Gone. I have to make sure I play from the right end of it. Etc. Okay, that's the opening bars of The Thriller's Gone, played by Paul Butterfield. And this poem is called On the Thriller's Gone by virtuoso harmonica player Paul Butterfield, who, like many great blues players, came to a not a particularly cheerful end. That's what this is about too. His nickname was Butter, by the way. Butter.
Excuse me, Steve, if I may interrupt, your volume all of a sudden went down. We cannot hear you very well. I'm not sure if the volume button on your computer.
Volume.
Sorry to put you on a spot like this, but we would love to hear you.
Find volume. I don't see anything that says volume.
Okay, so maybe
hold on. What's that say? Properties. Okay, that says volume, but it doesn't really. Hold on, let me just pop out of that one. This is a new. No, I'm up 100% on my volume.
Okay, well, let's keep going and maybe.
Oh, I've lost you.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me? I've lost you completely.
Yeah, I was off, but now I'm on. But I think you can go ahead.
Okay. So back to the previous. On the Thriller's Gone by virtuoso harmonica player Paul Butterfield. Butter, as I mentioned before, was his nickname. Butter, your masterful licks in the sweet forlorn key of D, with their warbling, heart-wringing wails collapsing into superlative sobs, still reassure me that for you, the thrill wasn't entirely gone, despite all those drinks and drugs puffing your gut and congealing your voice. I remember seeing you in a small, half-empty Brooklyn club, taking a break at the bar. By then you were a case, a swaying blue-lipped woebegone on the fast track to routine rock star accidental overdose, the saddest song. When it was time for you to mount the stage again, I hurried over, afraid you'd fall. But staggering, you waved me back, successfully climbed up alone and blew The Thrill Is Gone. And it was a shimmering, unforgettable, righted wrong. Still is. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Oops, here she is. Thank you both. Oh, I'm elated. What a wonderful afternoon this was. I think Gabriel wants to share a few words with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Apologies for the mishap, as it were. I will try and edit this when I put it on a YouTube. For future meetings, I will make sure that we have a sign-in, and I will let people in individually. We didn't do this initially because thinking that it may take too long, but I think we can see that we can be hijacked surprisingly all the time. So I want to make sure that this experience is good for everyone. Thank you very much for your understanding, your suggestions, and your encouragement. Gabriel?
I want to thank you both, Victoria and Steve, for your very engaging readings. Of course, please add my apologies for this grotesque interruption we had, and also the little glitch at the end with the volume. But I want to say that it's been a wonderful reading, and I really appreciate very much hearing your poetry. And I love the blues. I love the river and everything that came out through your poetry. Really beautiful and engaging. Please, next week, it'll be an exception, but next week, because we meet every 2 weeks, next week we'll have another reading, and Sonia will tell you it's Brian Traherne and Christine Williams who will be reading next time. Welcome you to the next one, and keep on following our readings. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Okay. Have you? Yeah, I can't see anything at my end, but presumably you can.
Yeah, we're still here.
I also would like to just thank again Gabriel and Sonia for nursing us through it the other night as well. It's been great experience, and yeah, it was great hearing you Steve, and Luce. That was fantastic. And you
too, Victoria. It's the first time I've ever done this, and it's something of a learning experience, isn't it? But including the unexpected intrusions, which I suppose sort of
intrusion. Yeah.
They sort of come with the ticket, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, we have to tighten our security. I'm sure that will be the way to do it.
But I think it's a wonderful idea, this poetry reading. So congratulations, Gabriel.
Wonderful to have the blues poetry right there. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. We are hoping to welcome you next week, as Gabriel said, on October 3rd, same time, 2 p.m. with Christian Williams and Brian Traherne. We will put the YouTube version of this event on our Facebook page and through email if you'd like to receive it. I included my email in the chat next on Sonia Patenaude communications@gmail.com. If you would like to communicate with me, I'd be happy to answer you and give you some help. On that note, please go enjoy the sun. Don't bring any sweaters. It's so beautiful out there today. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.